There's actually a person, and we've had Paul Lukas on before, UniWatch columnist for Sports Illustrated, founder of uniwatch.com. So he's the guru when it comes to uniforms, new uniforms, those who should get new uniforms, and he's very maniacal about this, and we appreciate his passion. Paul joins us now. Did Cleveland have to get approval to use the Color Rush jerseys more often this season?
Yes, Dan, they did, because normally whether you have a throwback or an alternate or your Color Rush, whatever your non-primary uniform is, you're normally only allowed to wear that 3 times per season. But the Browns wanted to switch from their current primary, their official primary, the one that has Cleveland in big letters across the chest and looks kind of more like a high school jersey. Mm. They wanted to switch from that to the Color Rush, and so they petitioned the league for that, and the league said yes. And so now this is their new primary brown uniform. And I have to say, if you think there's maybe such a thing as too much brown, this might be it, because you've got the brown jersey with the brown pants, and it remains to be seen if they're also going to wear it with the brown socks. But I know it was named after Paul Brown, and like you said, when we think of the Browns, we think of brown, but man, that's a lot of brown.
But you look at these uniforms, and there's certain teams that just don't change their look. Like Dallas doesn't change its look. I mean, you sometimes have those throwbacks, but, Cleveland, this isn't a throwback uniform that they're doing. Is it that the good teams, the established teams, don't change their look? They continue to keep like Penn State in football.
Right. Certainly teams with a deeper heritage and a longer history don't have to sort of put a shiny object out there to get people's attention. And there would probably be a revolt if they did. If you're the Green Bay Packers and you start monkeying around with different color combinations and things like that, your fan base is not going to appreciate that. But if you're a newer team, if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars and you don't have decades and generations worth of history and heritage to draw upon, it may make more sense, or at least you may think you need to do things to keep people's attention and to get some media attention and to keep those jersey sales going. So it really varies. I like to think of it as Coke versus Pepsi. Some teams are more like Coke. They never change. Like the Coke script never changes. They keep a slogan like, enjoy Coca-Cola, or Coke is it. Very simple, just the facts. And then there are teams that are more like Pepsi, which is constantly changing its logo and has slogans like the choice of a new generation or Generation Next, very youth-oriented. And so some teams are Coke teams and some teams are Pepsi teams.
The team or teams that need to change their uniforms?
In the NFL,
yeah.
I would say the Buccaneers, definitely. They've got those digital alarm clock numbers, that number font that nobody likes. The Cardinals, who are really a mess right now, they've got a helmet with that old school gray face mask, and that's sort of soldered onto a uniform chassis that is very newfangled and not old school at all. It has those ridiculous striped sleeves and that ridiculous piping down the sides of the pants. So it's really a mess. I would say the Cardinals might be number one in terms of needing an overhaul.
When do we start seeing ads on uniforms in the NFL?
I hope never. I'm really hoping that that doesn't come around. The league hasn't really floated any trial balloons about that yet. When the NBA did it, we heard league executives like Adam Silver, who at that time was not yet league commissioner. He was, I think, the number 2 guy to David Stern. He was talking about this and saying it would be inevitable long before it actually happened. That hasn't happened yet in the NFL. You don't hear Roger Goodell or any of his lieutenants really talking about, we're looking into that, or we never say never, or we're kind of trying to soften up the fan base for the inevitability of it. It may happen, but the wheels don't seem to be turning on that just yet.
Best uniforms in all of sports?
In all of sports, I would say the St. Louis Cardinals baseball, the Packers, who I mentioned earlier. I'm a big fan of green and gold as a color combination. Those are the Uniwatch colors, so I like the Packers too. New York Rangers in the NHL with a white uniform, which is now I always think of it as the home uniform, but it's now the road. But I remember when the NHL wore white at home. And I love everything that Golden State does in the NBA. Their uniform program is awesome.
What Oregon cultivated here with all their uniform changes, what was that, 2 decades ago, are they the standard bearer when it comes to this?
In terms of changing, normally as a team or any kind of brand, right, you want to stand for something. And what Oregon decided they were going to stand for was not standing really for anything or standing for constant change. And it worked well for them in terms of not just getting attention, but it helped with their recruiting, and they were successful on the field, right? Like they actually improved their program. But when you think about the next team that tried to do that, the University of Maryland, and Under Armour tried to do to them what Nike had done to Oregon with the flag-based uniforms and all the different changes, and it didn't really work out so well on the field, right? And I think the lesson that teams have learned from that is that if you dress like a clown and you win, you look like a winner. But if you dress like a clown and you lose, you just look like a clown. And I think if you're going to be outrageous, you better produce on the field, because otherwise you just look ridiculous.
But Notre Dame has changed their uniforms, and they're one of the standard bearers. I don't see USC doing this. There's certain Ohio State has changed a little bit. So
A little bit. What Notre Dame has done with their Shamrock series, right, where they play the one game per season, or it was every season. Now they're taking a break from it, where they would designate one game per year where they could sort of go a little nuts. But they kind of stay the course for the rest of the season. And they have their traditions, like they don't wear the names on the back, the players' names on the back of the jerseys until they make it to a bowl game. And so they've got that history and tradition and heritage that they mostly have stuck to. But they've used the Shamrock Series games as a way to cut loose a little bit.
It feels like helmets. That's been the latest craze in how shiny they are. Certainly with Notre Dame's. I was watching that against Louisville, and I was like, man, that is bright.
Yeah, they've got that really good metallic gold paint, and of course there's a story behind it. They say that it mimics the gold dome on campus. And yes, you do see that in college. I remember when I started writing about uniforms, pretty much every college team had one helmet except for Washington State, which for some reason had a home helmet and a road helmet, and that was seen as bizarre, like, whoa, two whole helmets. And now almost every college team has multiple helmets. They swap out different color face masks. They change the decals from week to week. And so it's a free-for-all out there. And then you compare that to the NFL, where they have stuck to this one shell rule for safety reasons, they say. The NCAA doesn't agree with them on this, but the NFL insists that players and teams stick to one helmet shell per season. And so a lot of throwbacks and different things that we used to see on the field in the NFL, we don't see anymore. And that's why the Buccaneers, for example, can't wear their old orange creamsicle throwbacks, because that would require a white helmet, and they're stuck with their pewter helmets. That's the one shell rule. They have to stick with the pewter shell. And so the NFL is a little hamstrung this year. And that's why, this is the NFL's 100th anniversary. And you may remember back in 1994, the 75th anniversary, they did all kinds of throwbacks. They rolled out a big throwback program. It was, in fact, the first throwbacks ever to appear in the NFL, and fans loved it. And they're not really doing that this year because of the one shell rule. They can't do it.
Worst uniform ever, any sport?
Any sport. Maybe the inaugural Tampa Bay Devil Rays uniforms in the late 90s, the one Wade Boggs was wearing when he got his 3,000th hit with that rainbow gradation. That was pretty awful. We were just talking about helmets. Certainly the Jacksonville Jaguars two-tone helmet that they wore, it was gold at the front and black in the back, or maybe the other way around. It was like, that was definitely the worst helmet in NFL history. They got rid of that, thankfully. There's certainly plenty of contenders for the worst. I usually try to focus on what's best.
Thank you, Paul. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Dan.
That's Paul Lukas, uniwatch.com, columnist for Sports Illustrated.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune into Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV. Stream for free on BR Live or download the Dan Patrick Show app.